All right, and after that, I'll pass it back to Charisse. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. And let's see, we are going to get started with our webinar. And we have the best person possible to lead us in our webinar today, which is Forecast Unknown, Strategy Strong, Budget Planning when Answers Are to Be Determined. We have Mr. Steve Curiel, who is the principal at Huntington Beach Adult School. And today he is going to be sharing with us some information about how to move forward with your budget planning. And it is the perfect time, as again, the governor's May revise came out just in time for our webinar. And so we planned that perfectly, knowing that the revise had to come out by today. And so we are grateful that Steve is here. Steve Curiel has been working in adult education for over 20 years as a teacher and an administrator, and he's overseen a variety of programs in that time. And as I shared earlier, he's currently the principal at Huntington Beach Adult School. He's been an active leader in professional organizations like the California Council for Adult Education and CAIA, the California Adult Education Administrators Association, having served as president in both of those organizations. And he has been awarded with leadership awards as well as the Administrator of the Year in Adult Education from AXA as well for his region. We're very, very excited to have him here. He works with us in CalPro as a presenter as well as a coach for the Leadership Institute. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve so that we can have some time in this webinar to talk about things that are happening right now. Steve, it's all yours.
Thank, thank you, Charisse, for that introduction and for pointing out how old I am. That's all good. And sorry, folks, no Otter AI to take notes. You're gonna have to pay careful attention. So I do appreciate that. I know you will, and I'm glad to see many of you I've seen at other conferences, other activities. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my presentation. Just gotta find it. Choices. Does that look right? Presentation. All right, so welcome again, and hopefully we'll be able to get through some stuff that will be helpful to you right now. As I know, this is about the time of year that your district fiscal folks, if you're privileged enough to design your own budget, set up your own budget, they're asking for it. What's your budget for next year? They got to enter those in and get all that process going. And of course, your response is, well, I wish I knew what my budget was for next year because I'm still waiting for some things. So hopefully you'll have some answers in this that will help you respond to that and kind of give you some reassurances, at least in terms of planning and what you think you might want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and start our next slide. So I always start with this slide as we hope for the best. I'm always hoping that things are going to be great and the funding is going to be there, that we're going to get increase in fundings, get a new grant that we applied for. But of course, we always plan for situations that might not be the best, might be bad in some cases. So always have a plan for what could happen. So I have a question here for you guys, and this you should be able to annotate, use the annotate feature, which is a cool feature that Zoom has. What concerns you most about your schools? I'm sorry, that's the wrong question. I thought I updated that question, but this is a question about your anxiety level around the budget right now. If you were to check one of those faces, mom was in the hospital for a little bit, and I kept seeing that chart that has the pain tolerance scale. So what's your anxiety tolerance right now? Where are you right now? So just get a feel for it. Feeling good, a little anxious, middle, worried. Just folks just having fun with the annotate. That's a cool feature. Some people got to get fancy with the check marks. All right. So kind of across the scale, no one's feeling horrible right now, but right in the middle, whether you're okay or some anxiety, some people feeling good. So you must have a great, healthy reserve and strong support from your district. I wish, yes, it'd be great if we could all be there. So thank you for that feedback. Again, hopefully my goal is, and I should have done this, put the anxiety scale back at the end and measure learning, if you will, do a check for understanding and see if this changes after this presentation. Hopefully we'll be more towards the left at the end of this. All right, so state budget outlook right now. And this was done prior to today. So I have another slide with some updates that we'll look at the governor's revised. So based on the last proposal by the governor, we were looking at ongoing deficits of 20 to 30 billion dollars. This is LAO painting this picture. Governor's always has a rosier outlook. Seems like every governor always has a rosier outlook, and the LAO is always has to play the devil's advocate and point out everything that could go wrong. And it always seems to be somewhere maybe in the middle, or maybe more so in the rosier these last few years, which is interesting, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. COLA 2.87. That was That was not the original January proposal. January was at 2.31, but as some of you might know, the COLA is actually I think it's in statute that it's based on a number of indicators that have nothing to do with California, but more so to do with the national economy. And that's calculated, and it was released officially, the final number, I think last month, to be 2.87% for 26.7. And I want to note that that is the COLA as determined by this other factor. The legislature and the governor still have to agree whether they're going to fund that or do something different. So that's at their discretion, but that is the cost of living adjustment that is calculated independent of the governor, the legislature, the LAO. So it's an interesting number we deal with. And then revenues are up, have been consistently up from the January budget proposal. So they projected so much in revenues over the last January, February, March, and they have beaten every month, which is an interesting thing to happen. It seems like it's a common thing that's been happening the last few years, but that's looking good. And then you have CAPE changes. Are there any CAPE changes proposed? We don't know of any at this point, other than some of you guys that are working with some of you folks that are working with the EL Healthcare Pathways funding that's funded through CAPE. That's out there in limbo, and we're hoping for some extensions on that or continuance of that in the form of new funding that would go another 3 years. So talk a little bit about that in a minute. Federal budget, again, we're in that time of the year, and I'll talk about the federal budget cycle, but where the president submits what's called the skinny budget, a very high-level view, and in that skinny budget, he again, like last year, proposes to eliminate adult education, the literacy aspect of WIOA in the 27-28 budget. That's what's being discussed right now. We also have a lot of concerns around the Iran conflict and the blockade of Hormuz on the federal budget. Obviously, with the blockade of oil and raising the cost of oil, that raises the cost of products, our own gas prices, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing that now and seeing it now. Tariffs, of course, another concern, has been a concern since last year, and you see it in the news. And I personally was thinking we were going to have a recession just based on all the news I was reading, that the tariffs are going to wreck the economy, and yet we're at a 2.2% growth in domestic product, which I point that out because no one can predict what's going on right now. It's our best economists thought we were going to be in really bad shape, and here we are with this growth factor. And then while we're growing, we've got these other things happening, like the Iran conflict, that who knows how that's going to impact our ongoing budgets and funding. So quick look at the federal budget process right now. We're in the process where the agencies, the federal government agencies like the Department of Education, which we all keep an eye on, Department of Labor, they're submitting budgets And the legislature is also coming up with appropriation packages to be considered in this process. The short of it is they have until June 30th to pass a budget. They have not passed a budget. I don't know how many years. It's kind of like assumed they're not gonna pass the budget in time. The actual fiscal year ends September 30th with the new fiscal year starting October 1st. That's for the federal funding cycle. So the budget they are discussing right now is one that would not take effect until October 1st. If they do not pass a budget by September 30th, then you're looking at what's called the continuing resolutions that we've heard a lot about. And that is where they vote on smaller packages and just to continue funding them at a same level as prior year. And that's what's been happening. That's what happened with WIOA last year. And as they negotiate some of the bigger items that they're dealing with, like some more of the politically heated topics like Homeland Security and military spending. So those type of things are higher ticket items, and they're discussing those as priorities. So we're in that mode where we're just waiting to see federal budget, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen with Leo. And for California, our budget looks similar, where we had a January proposal, and the Assembly and the Senate, all of them review or responded to that January proposal with their own proposals. And we have also during that time before May, we have the finalization of the COLA. May revise comes out, which we will get into in just a minute. And then they go through the process again, Assembly budget. Now with this new information that they have with the revised COLA, the new funding amounts or revenue amounts, I'm sorry, and the governor's proposal, they will respond to the governor with their own proposals. And then they negotiate, and then we get a budget approved, most likely on time by June 15th. I believe the deadline is to approve the budget, and the governor has until June 30th to sign. And as some of you might know, if our legislature does not get that budget finalized and submitted and sent over to the governor by June 15th, they don't get paid. And so there's incentive for them to get it done so that the governor can then look at it. And at that point, the governor's only option is to blue. He can't add anything else. He's got the I think it's called the blue pencil, and he can just line out expenditures, but he can't add to it. So we'll have a pretty solid budget come June 15th, and then hopefully we'll see some good things, and we are seeing some good things for K-12, I'll say. So breaking news on the federal side, WIOA specifically, our preliminary amounts are posted in the GAN. On our Adult Ed website. So you have to go in, log in, and you can see your amount. CD decided this time to post in our individual amounts. We cannot see each other's amounts because typically we would see a Excel spreadsheet posted out on the CD website, and we could look up our school. And I know all of you looked up everybody else's school, all your neighbors, all your friends, to see what they're getting. And that's been the kind of practice for us. And you want to see who's going up, what are they doing, if they got more money, how did they get more money? So you're calling out what you guys do different last year to get that increase. And so that right now is posted. That's a good thing because now you can start planning out your budget pretty securely, even though you do not have the grant award notification in hand. But most districts will let you, based on it being posted on the website, let you start putting out a budget and making some decisions as far as staffing or expenditures that you might have planned for next year. So that's a good thing for us. Governor's revise. So this just came out this morning. I saw an email from our advocate, Don Kepke, and I right away then went to the budget that was proposed, the high level budget that's out there. And some interesting things are coming out of it. So some good things for us that are part of K-12, actually K-12 and community colleges. The governor, remember I was pointing out that there was a 2.87 COLA that was calculated, again, independent of what the governor and legislature calculate. This is something that's just given to them. Here's the COLA for the nation. The governor is actually proposing a super COLA, which is an increase to 4.31% to LCFF. Those of us in K-12 districts, LCFF, where your elementary and high schools are funded on, and middle schools, and the student-centered funding formula, which is the college's version of LCFF. So they get a super COLA. Okay. I'm going to skip down to bullet 3. Adult ed and other categoricals are only getting a 2.87% COLA. So that differential is problematic, can be problematic for us on the adult ed side. Why? Because in most cases, our adult school teachers, typically when the negotiations are happening for teacher salaries and classified salaries, they're tied in with your high school teachers and your classified teachers. There's always like a Me Too or classified, especially, they're typically part of the exact same unit, the CSEA bargaining unit, as the high school and elementary school classified staff. So we as adult ed might have to increase our salary schedules by 4.31% or whatever they negotiate, 4%, 5%. But with a 4.31%, it's probably going to be somewhere closer to 4.3 versus 2.87. But you're only going to get an increase to your funding of 2.87 if the governor's proposal goes as is. So that is a problem in budgeting, because if you don't get the 4.31, where are you going to get the other 1.5% to fund salaries that could be up near 4.3 or higher? And that what that translates is you're going to have to find that money somewhere else, whether you got to cut programs, cut spending somewhere just to cover your salaries. And in most cases, all our salaries are the highest portion of our budget. So it could be pretty significant for other things that you do, or it could mean you might have to cut back in your programming, i.e. staffing, to pay for other teachers, which is something that's the last thing we want to do. So we'll be advocating to try to get it back to 4.31 or get it to 4.31 just like everyone else. And we haven't had this actually get passed in 20 years that I've been in adult ed. It's happened where the proposal was there, but they've always made it right. So I'm crossing my fingers, our COLA will get up to 4.31 just to be equalized with our peers in our K-12 districts. Also, the governor is proposing a 14-week paid pregnancy leave, and he justifies it because he's giving K-12 and as colleges a 1.4% increase to COLA. And again, we're not getting that 1.4%. So another reason why we should get the same COLA. For K-12 districts, he's maintaining $1 billion for community schools. And the reason why I highlight that in this adult ed presentation, this adult ed conversation, is that community schools in many ways mimic the things that we do in our school, adult schools. We are in many ways community schools because we have partnerships with other providers like social services agencies. Some of you might have legal services for immigration, for housing. So a lot of similar services that you would expect on a community schools, on a K-12, are also present in adult schools. And so in that, there might be opportunities to partner with your local, either high school or community school or elementary school, whichever one's at a community school, so that you can help give access to some of your families that you serve through the high school or elementary school that's getting this community schools money. We have asked that adult schools be included in that funding, but that is not currently in the proposal that we're seeing. So, but there's something to keep an eye on. And then the community colleges are getting a one-time increase of $607,000 to their flexible block grant. This is now an increase of up to $100 million they have for flexible block grant spending. What I hear from my college folks typically that the non-credit side doesn't get any of that, but there's always an opportunity if there's more money out there. That's the discretion of the college district to put money into adult ed, albeit on the college side, but that might alleviate on the consortium side if there's funding available. If the colleges non-credit programs can get some of this money, that might free up money for our K-12 adult schools if you have a nice collaborative consortium that way. And then no mention of extra money to extend EL Healthcare Pathways funding. So that's not in the budget. We were hoping that we would get that. So we're still going to advocate for that. Remembering that there's still a process that's going to take place with the Assembly and the Senate and them proposing a budget. So more to be seen on that. I'm going to check for questions real quick in case there's anything. I do want to allow for questions right now just because this is all new And I want to make sure if I'm missing something on the interpretation, or if you're seeing something that I didn't see, definitely we could discuss it right now, and I could take it back to folks on our advocacy teams. Let's see here.
And Steve, I'm not even sure. Maybe we can ask the question, has everybody gotten to see the May revise at this point? Okay. So I see one hand and I see a lot of heads saying no. So we'll get the link in the chat.
Yeah, and if you go to definitely, so I know it by heart. E-budget, so ebudget.ca.gov, and that's our governor's. Just look that up, put it in Google, and it'll get you to the May revise, and there's only the forget what they it's like. It's not called the high level, but it's a very cursory. It doesn't get in detail, but that's typically all you need. You'll see the major proposals there.
I put a link in the chat with the budget.
Oh, thank you, Cedro. There it is. Yeah, good stuff there. Interesting.
Go to page
Spec
8, page 9. It starts with the education section.
Yeah. And for adult ed, where you see adult ed mentioned is going to be under community college, that funding section. So you won't see us mention in the K-12 area, which always used to scare me, like what happened? Where's the adult ed? But our actual funding, the CAPE funding, gets allocated to the chancellor's office. And so anything with dealing with adult ed, COLAs, and extra funding typically is going to show up under the community colleges instead of K-12, which is a weird to me always, but that's the way we're set up right now. Okay, so we all, yes, Rebecca, yeah, some of us are taking hits. We took a little bit of a hit. That's probably the more pressing for some of you folks. We owe it changes and um, can be pretty dramatic. I know another school that's losing 300,000. So it's the volatility. It's what we owe is. I think we've all have probably experienced a significant drop at one time. We've been adult ed, you've seen a big drop, and then others sometimes you see a big increase. So yes, sir.
Steve, just a question on that because I am all of a sudden lost right now because ultimately we weren't expecting obviously that kind of hit. If
Mhm.
some people are taking hits and some people are not, how are they factoring in that? How are they figuring that out?
That is a Rubik's Cube question. How do you solve the Rubik's Cube? Remember that device? It is a puzzle that I still can't. Basically, what's happening, and I'll do my best. Every year, we're competing against each other. So there's years where you might look back at your data from last year, which is what's this coming year is based on. So we're a year in the rears, they say. And you might say, I got a 5% increase in my payment points. We did a great. We beat the year before. So I'm expecting an increase of 5% for the next year, when that funding comes around. But if you got a 5% increase and everybody else on average got a 10% increase, did 10% better, you're going to most likely lose funding because of the competitive nature. And there's no way you can tell because you'd have to track everybody to see how they're doing. CD, I know, tries to build in some mechanisms to try to not have big sways. So I don't know if that, I'm assuming that's the case this year, but yeah, it's unfortunate and something we have to deal with. And one of the reasons why CAPE is so nice, I think why it's been maintained level where you can't shift, you can't move money in CAPE. It's almost like set. It is set almost in statute because we owe it can fluctuate so much on a performance-based model. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I'd be calling a consultant, asking that question, and they can give you a little more behind the scenes, hopefully, to help make sense of it. And I'll talk about that, how I handle WEO and that potential that can always happen each year.
And that's why it was so important to have the full spreadsheet because you could compare and
Mm.
and I did that. I think I put that in the chat. I did that every year so that I would know what the swings were and who was getting significantly more and who was getting significantly less so that I could almost look at a trend over 3 years back to somewhat anticipate, okay, this program is, they're on the upswing of performance, and that's going to impact other programs and maybe mine, and we need to be prepared to do something different with our testing, with our performance, because funds are shrinking or they're moving this way. So not having that, I don't know if CDE understands the implications of not having the full spreadsheet, but that's one that data that programs don't have anymore.
Yeah, and I think I heard it's going to be posted. It's just
Not until August.
not until August. Yeah, they're waiting for the actual something from the federal government. They're waiting for something, but it is making it hard. It just leaves us in the unknown and it's less transparent, we'll say, than what we're used to. All right, so we'll talk about a little bit how to plan around that in a minute. So as we take on these changes and we're adapting to what we're finding out with the WIOA and what we're finding now with our CAPE funding, you got to start building a budget. So you got to start, and this is where I get into more detail. So in your budgeting, you want to start off, you want to make sure what all your sources of funding are. Pell Grants, CalWORKs, Perkins. In some cases, you might have someone at the district that's taking care of that for you, but you want to know what that is. You want to know the full extent. And all these funding amounts that are coming to you are posted on CD's website. There's an allocation. Under finance on CD's website, you can look up. There's a page there that you can type in Pell Grants or CalWORKs, and you can look up every year's funding. And then you can look up your school, whether it's in a spreadsheet or specifically in their database. So you want to know what your funding sources are. You want to know how uncertain. You have a kind of a scale for which ones are uncertain. For example, WIOA is every year is uncertain. It sways. I've been doing adult ed and dealing with WIOA for 20 years now, and I've seen shifts. One down one year 300, up another year 250, 350, and it's one of those that sways a lot. And then now, considering the president's proposal to eliminate it entirely, it's a sketchy funding source. We appreciate it, but it has a more of a risk factor now. If it's tied to state budget, our state budget tends to be a little more stable, at least for since 09, I'll say, or 12, 13, so when we got CAPE adult ed funding back. We had a rough time there before that, but our state funding tends to be a little more stable, which again, that's what we want. We want stable funding. And when we talk about fees, that depending on how good a business person you are, if you're overseeing directly community ed and fee-based programs, a CTE, that's, again, you want somebody that's good at managing programs and managing costs to maintain and get you a good stable revenue stream for those. But that, again, is community-based, economy-based too. As the economy goes down, less funding available for those type of programs. And you want to know what the restrictions are, because as we lose funding, so if you're losing funding in WIOA, okay, what am I going to do with what I was, that's $80,000 was paying for X, Y, and Z. How do I cover that? Do I want to keep covering it? And what fund sources will allow me to pay for that? What funding sources would allow for us to pay for those things? So you want to make sure you know those rules, and those are all posted with each fund source. So considering what we just talked about in the fund sources and knowing the risk factors, this is my kind of just the way I kind of look at the world right now in terms of our funding streams. So CAPE last few years has been really good. CAPE, I'm now saying it's not it's got some risk in it because of the EL healthcare pathways funding disappearing that a lot of us used to build out CTE programs. To be fair, we knew the money was going to end, but we were hoping there would be an extension, that we would prove that investing in adult ed programming is cost benefit to the state, and that we could show the outcomes. And I think we did. Funding is not there to continue those programs, so we'll be faced with some tough decisions. Those schools that did get it, those schools that didn't get it, maybe it's not as big of an issue for them. But then add now the COLA differential. That's another issue that could be challenging for us. Yes, we'll take a COLA, but if we're forced to increase our costs because salary negotiations, and can be problematic for us. WIOA was a concern last year. We got passed last year. We got our funding, and here we are again looking at a proposal from the president. And I'll say also it's the House of Representatives is also in alignment with the president to eliminate WIOA adult literacy funding. The Senate has been very supportive, and so we're hoping the Senate will come through again to maintain our funding level. And I think from the advocacy folks that I'm hearing on the federal side, they're thinking that would probably be the case, but you got to keep advocating. If you guys get your emails from COABE and CCA, we'll share that and make sure you're sending letters to the representatives, those folks that are in that negotiation over WIOA, that we maintain the funding. The other piece of that is it's moving over. It looks like it's almost a done deal. It will be, in many ways, managed by the Department of Labor. And that's something we don't know what that looks like. But it would still be for adult literacy, but what new requirements are they going to put on that? Are they going to make it more restrictive? We don't know yet. So WIOA is looking a little bit more risky. Fees, in the past, I've heard from other schools that they've been fee-based programs, and CTE classes have been growing. Students have been able to afford the cost and allowing schools to add more programs. I'm just looking at an economy that, again, based on all the news you see, gas prices going up, cost of living, insurance, all these things that are going up for folks, will they have the money to support and pay for classes that they want to take? And then CalWORKs. CalWORKs has been stable, but there's an element of it tied to federal funding. I probably should have said more stable. I'm just always concerned about CalWORKs just because in my experience, in my county, mine's very volatile like WIOA. One year I'm getting $250,000. Another year I'm getting $70,000. So it sways. It can sway as well. And Perkins is another one. If you get Perkins, I believe so. I've heard it's volatile. We don't get Perkins at my school, but it's something that's hasn't been as stable that I've heard from what I'm hearing. But again, this is my interpretation. But my point about this slide is you should have a feel for which are your funding sources that are most solid and which ones are riskier, because you should be thinking about that when you do your planning. So when you get down to numbers, you start opening up spreadsheets and putting in budgets. You want to have a feel for what's your average. What are you spending annually on average? Like if you have a $4 million budget, are you spending $4 million every year when you combine everything? How big is your program? What are your expenditures on average for the last few years? So you can have a trend and you can kind of see, I need this much money to operate my program each year. And are you spending over every year? Are you going over by a little bit? Or do you have a surplus every year? Maybe you're saving some money. That information you want to be aware of, because that can give you cushions when you need them, or it might tell you need to cut back, because you might decide to go over 1 year because of you need facilities upgrades or some costs of big ticket items. But when it becomes a trend, it becomes unsustainable, even with big reserves. You can only go for so long. So you want to make sure you're seeing if you're trending up or down. Again, are you building a reserve? So is that something I'm recommending for everyone, to have a good reserve to the extent that it's your school district allows, and then your consortium has a little bit of sway in that as well with CAPE funding. You might have some negotiations or some bylaws that restrict you in your reserves, each member, but I would try to maximize those to the point that it makes sense. 100% reserve probably doesn't make sense, because that means a lot of students aren't getting services. But I always advocate, I repeat what CASBO says, which is the Association of School Business Officials, to have like a 17%, 20% reserve. That's about 2 months of expenditures. In case something happens, you've got that in the bank. And reserves also, that's your safety net, so that if you're going to go over 1 year, if you need to do something that's more expensive than you thought, you can go over your budget because you have a reserve. Reserve also is a cash flow issue. What I mean by cash flow is that money, that reserve, is typically sitting in a bank as cash, real money sitting there, that in years past, For example, when our CAPE funding was delayed months on end, we were operating 1 year, 4 months into the year, we had no CAPE funding that was distributed because of some tie-ups between the chancellor's office and CDE. You're still paying your staff, you're paying your utilities, all your bills every month, but the money was not coming in. A reserve would be money in the bank that you can draw on and pay for those things, because your district is also paying for things, and they can float some adult schools for a little bit with their cash reserves, but they don't have, like our kids, when they ask for a toy or whatever, just use your credit card, mom, or just write a check, because the checkbook still has checks in it. It doesn't work like that for us. So we have to have the cash in order to pay for our bills, and having a reserve gives you that cash, that cushion. It also gives you flexibility when you want to do something. If you have a reserve, you can take a little bit more risk if you want to start a new program. If it's going to be more expensive, that that there's a possibility that it could be more expensive. That if you're going to do a build out, a new building, a possibility that it could be more expensive than you plan. So a reserve gives you flexibility to take on projects like that. It also gives you time, like in case of, I know, is it Rebecca? I know the $80,000 hit to WIOA, a reserve might give you some time to absorb that and not have to make cuts right away. You might be able to absorb it for 1 year and give you a year's time to figure out what you're going to do. Maybe cross your fingers that the increase goes up next year, or gradually spend less, decrease your spending. And then you should know what your minimum is. You should, in your mind, think, and probably a discussion with your fiscal folks at the district office, this is my minimum. My goal is to have a 15% reserve. I don't want to go below that, because I might need it in dire straits 1 year. The 80,000 might be one of that dire straight situations. So you would say that 15% is going to save me and help me deal with that. So you want to, in your mind, set a target. It's kind of like your savings account, where everyone says you should have 2 months savings in the bank. You want to set that and then communicate that to your staff, to your leadership, so they know you're going to have some money there just in case. So that's on the revenues and your revenue side and your overall big picture spending. Now you want to look at what are your fixed costs? What costs are built in your budget that you have really very little control over? So when you have permanent staff like teachers and counselors, administrators who are already tenured or are in permanent status, those are pretty much fixed costs. You've got to go through a process to reduce those costs, which most school districts are not happy to do. They want to that's a last resort for them to do layoff notices and make it public, go through a board process. And you do not want to go to your board and say, well, I want to do layoffs, because that's not going to resonate well. So you have those are fixed costs. Contracts and leases, when you have a multi-year, you might have an agreement for a lease on a building for 10 years. So that's a fixed cost. Utilities, some of them might be fixed because you just got to pay for your electricity, your water, and so forth. Medical insurance. Some of you might be hearing this, and I know I've heard it from my just fiscal folks, that those costs are increasing. And if you have full-time folks that get benefits, they're going to continue to get benefits, and you just can't cut them because they're most likely tied to the contract. So those are expenses you want to know. And then all those combined, that's kind of like your bottom line. This is where I have no control over this, and I'm going to focus on the non-fixed costs. When I need to make adjustments, like, sorry to keep picking on the $80,000 that we owe ahead, but you start looking at part-time staff, you start looking at materials and supplies, conferences, software licenses, all those things that you get to have a say over as an administrator. That's where you have your flexibility, the most flexibility, and you want to be able to identify, okay, what those are. I know if I have to go somewhere to cut, this is where it's going to be more doable than some of these other fixed costs. So having an idea what the difference between the two and knowing what they are in your budget is going to be very important in your planning. When you have those low-hanging fruits, those fixed costs, when you have the fixed costs, you want to then go through a process of figuring out which of those would be the easiest, least impactful cuts I would have to make. Not that you'll make them, but you're just going to identify and have an idea. These are the ones. I know I can go to. I've got 3 classes I know are just low enrollment. There's hard there. I get, let's say, I have very few students where my average is maybe 20 in every other class. These classes are down in the low teens. If I had to, I already know which classes I could cut to save costs if I need to, and it will have a low impact on students. What about infrequently used or ineffective services? You might have a contract for copiers that are hardly ever used. That they're just there. There's 2 teachers that use a copier, and maybe not the best use for it, but you've had a contract and you could decide that's not worth the cost or the expense anymore. You might look at online software licenses that aren't being used by your students. Some teachers swear by, I need that, whatever that product is that you're paying for. And then when you run a back end report and you ask your tech or or your sales rep, can you show me on a monthly basis or on a daily basis how many students are logging into the system? Then you'll have a feel for whether you need it or not. If there's not that many students, even though teachers say that students are using it all the time, you can have the real numbers because you can get the information. You can get that report. Staff or services that are not part of your core. Sometimes we have programs that are just out there we're supporting, or services we provide. Maybe you have childcare, or and some of you might consider childcare core, but childcare might be something that's not affordable anymore. Those are typically big ticket items, or staff that are providing curriculum development or providing maybe some coaching or whatever that might be. Some of those services might not be as critical to your overall program. And then looking at facilities and materials and supplies that you can extend the use on. So sometimes you got some books maybe that have been they're 4 years old, 5 years old, and teachers are saying they're falling apart. Like, we need more new books. Books are expensive. I mean, I know because we're ordering some new medical books, and they're upwards near $150 to $200 a piece. So I've been pushing off, saying, no, you're gonna use them one more. We'll get you some tape, and we'll get another year out of those books, because they're costly when you're ordering 50 or 60 of them at a time. So those are easy cuts, and you can adapt. It doesn't impact the core of your program. Alternative strategies: partner with other agencies. I'll talk about these in just a little more detail. Charge or increase your fees. Apply for grants. This is a good time to be looking at that, considering that. And what I mean by that is agency partnerships. Workforce development boards. We know, as WIOA funded agencies, we're supposed to be collaborating with our workforce development boards. I know it's hard in some situations, some counties. It took me about 10 years for me to get into a good relationship with our workforce boards. And now I'm in good, we work well together. We're getting services from them and writing grants together. But they can help share costs with you. They might maybe agree to pay half of a person that's providing workforce related support services. They can support students if they qualify. They can pay for the cost of students to attend your school. For CTE programming, they have a number of things they can do to help offset some costs for you. Community college, dual enrollment. This is where obviously dual enrollment's big for the state of California right now, but this is where you could say, I can't offer these. I need to cut back in ESL. I've got some good classes. I can't afford all these classes. Hey, college, do you want to offer the classes on my campus, and our students would be enrolled? Maybe they'll do our CTE, but they'll do your college. I'm sorry, they'll do our ASC, and they can do your CTE classes on my campus. So there's a lot of opportunity there to share costs. And everyone hates to give over students that are successful with them, but when you have to decrease costs, the colleges can be a partner in that and help at least provide the services ongoing to your students. Social services agencies are also there. They've had grants in the past. They have a grant right now we're applying for that can help you offset costs for the support services you provide, or they can help your students with the costs of classes, costs of materials, costs of childcare. So they can be a resource as well. Your own districts, they might, and I go back to the community schools grant. one of your schools might say, we want parent education for our adult parents we want to help the kids, and we want to help them by helping their parents learn English or helping their parents get a diploma or GED. And so we'll help fund one of your teachers, or we'll help fund some support, or help fund childcare, tutoring that while the parents go to your ESL classes at night. So your school districts can be a good source, especially when they can see an impact that's going to come back to their kids. It's going to help their kids perform better. And Department of Rehab, they're same as social services agencies. They have a lot of resources that can support students on your campus, whether it's parent fees, materials, learning devices that can help them access your curriculum. So partner agencies are big for us, and a lot of us have grown in that respect. Charging fees for classes. This is something that a lot of us have been moving away. Some of us have been moving away from fees. Some of us have been moving towards fees. No, there's no right or wrong, but if we're facing cuts, if we're looking at potential loss of significant numbers, and thinking about adding fees to your CT classes or expanding is definitely something I would be considering. For my school, we're considering that just because the costs of the CT classes are getting expensive, and especially with books and materials. There's also, if you're charging fees for classes and you're thinking, well, some of our students can't afford it, well, then you have the opportunity to be a FAFSA agency. And there's about 10 of them 10 adult schools that are receiving Pell Grants, and now are going to be able to receive short-term Pell Grants for their students. And so those funds can help pay for the cost of instruction. So where you might have a class, I know over at Downey, I don't know, maybe half of their students are supported through financial aid, and they can pay for the cost of the medical assistant program, for example, that might be $4,000. Well, half of that's covered with Pell Grants. But there is some work in that. I'm encouraging our state level folks. We need to have some more training and some PD around what does it mean to be a FAFSA agency and get certified or accredited through the Commission on Occupational Education, which is an add-on to your WASC accreditations. And then Workforce Development Board support. Again, if you're charging fees for classes, the Workforce Development Board can authorize students to take your classes, and they'll cover the cost. So again, there's some advantages to having a fee-based program at your school. And then there's grants. Still lots of grants, hundreds of grants out there. They're a lot of work. I know we've been applying for some, but I'm finding that once you get in a rhythm and you have somebody that kind of is used to writing grants, they become a lot more doable. Obviously, you got to be careful what the requirements are to make sure you meet the requirements. But Department of Labor has a lot of grants, social services agencies, Department of Rehab, and private foundations all have grants available. Toyota, for example, Sir Optimus has one for women in adult education that's out there in the nation. If you go to grants.gov, you can do a search and you can find stuff that's out there. They're not that big. You're looking at a few $1,000s. Some of them are hundreds, but if you have someone that's really good at them, and if students are willing to apply for them to help with their costs of going to school, that could be another way to help kind of backfill some loss if you're seeing a loss or you're seeing your expenses rise too quickly. All right, just an opportunity for folks to share. Are there and share with each other, because I don't know all the opportunities that are out there. What are other ways you found to increase revenues or decrease costs that maybe I haven't covered now? So if you want to share. So we got a couple comments. We just did a reduction. Thanks, Sharice, for putting that very useful information out. Oh, Perkins is also another thing that I think is still, let me see if that's, however, shifts. Yeah, so Perkins, we would potentially lose it for adult ed. So it would be focused on K-12 or high schools.
Yeah.
So
and that's because, again, the belief is that if things happen right in the high schools, there's no need for adult education. And so there would be no need to fund Perkins at adult ed because we wouldn't have adult ed. So we just fund it in the middle and high schools at the federal level. That's kind of the belief right now of why it's being proposed to be eliminated. It's very misguided and misunderstanding who our audience is.
Yeah. Let's see here. Where
So
is
we
it?
have 3 minutes left, and I want to thank
Oh,
you
wow.
again, Steve, for leading us through this and again bringing us current to the minute of what's happening with the May revise. Always something to really think about as we are preparing in this time of continued uncertainty, this time of continued need to advocate for the value and worth of our program so that the funding that is needed to support what we are doing continues to be there. I will say that we were zero funded at the federal level last year too, and at the end we were level funded, and I believe that that will be the same that happens this year. Um, Although even when that happens, as you've experienced, the changes of WIOA can fluctuate in your program, even with the federal funding coming in level and California getting more funding this year than in previous years from WIOA. That said, CAPE is the stable piece, and with California and the revise, that consistency continues to be reflected in the governor's budget, and our advocacy efforts now are to get the COLA to be consistent across and not to have a differential COLA. So I appreciate this time to really inform us about what's happening right now so that we can start thinking about what that process might look like at our site. Maria, with that, I think we'll bring up our wrap-up slides. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I think that this helps get folks who are here really prepared. We want to know what you thought about today's webinar as we are going into the end of our program year. As we head to June 30th, the end of the fiscal year. We are starting to already think ahead about what you want us to bring to you next year as we're preparing our webinar series for the upcoming new fiscal year. Please let us know what you thought about today's webinar and what kind of information that you need to prepare ahead for next year. I heard again about Workforce Pell and the rising costs of our CTE programs and needing support there. But what other items and areas are you most interested in that we can bring you? So looking forward to hearing from you, and I want to thank you again for being with us this afternoon and looking forward to seeing you very soon, many of you, at other administrative training opportunities through CalPro. Thank you again, Steve, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.